I'm so excited to dupe Club Nebula from Kaleidos for you all. The good and different thing about duping this palette is that I actually have the OG Club Nebula. So I'm going to swatch compare these two palettes next to each other, and you can see how closely the dupes are to the OG shades. If that sounds good, don't forget a thumbs up and let's jump in. As always, we do top to bottom, left to right. I'm going to swatch every shade next to the OG shade so that you can see comparisons. I also have some extras that I am recommending as alternatives. Let's go. For the first dupe, I picked Water Mist from Devinah. I have a swatch of this whole collection that I'll link below. For each of these swatches, I'm swatching the shade from the palette at the top and the alternatives below it. So here you have Firefly at the top. Hopefully the camera's capturing that Firefly looks like it has a lot of glitters in it, whereas Water Mist is extremely creamy. But this was the closest dupe I could find from the shades I have in my collection. If you have an alternative suggestion, let me know in the comments below. You can see the beautiful green shift there that goes into a purple and pink. And as you can see, Water Mist has a lot more of an extreme shift. These are the two shades away from light. And it's easier to see here that the green shade in Firefly is more warm toned and a lot more minty in Water Mist. For the second shade, I picked Scuba Diver from Sydney Grace. Scuba Diver is a little bit deeper than 7 of 9, but on your eyes, the difference might not show. Also, I didn't have a lighter shade. I swatched a whole lot of shades for this palette. It was a pretty coveted request. This one is Arsenic from Copacetic. Such a beautiful matte. Although not an exact dupe, Arsenic is a very, very close dupe of Gravity. For the next shade, I have two options. We have Caribbean Blue from Looxi Beauty, which is a lot more teal, and Conjour from Colourpop, which is a lot more green. So we have Queen of Blades at top, Caribbean Blue in the middle, and Conjour at the bottom. And you can see that Caribbean Blue is the closer shade to Queen of Blades, but Queen of Blades is a little more green, which is why I thought, well, if you actually want to go the green route, Conjour might be an option. For the next one, we also have two options. First one is a Complicated from Looxi. I know mine looks like it came back from war. I've repressed it. And we also have Flannel from Shroud Cosmetics. We have Void at the top, Complicated in the middle, and Flannel at the bottom. And you can see that Void and Complicated are a lot more closer dupes. And Flannel is just a lot more deeper and more blue. The other two shades have a tad bit of purple in them. Unfortunately, it's difficult to get your hands on Looxi if you don't already have Complicated in your collection. This next shade was the hardest to dupe, and that's why I have three options. I don't think any of them is exactly a dupe. And the reason for that is because my shade from the palette has kind of dried up, and it's difficult to know what this shade would look like at full capacity. So for it, I have Celestial Petal as an option from Terramoons, Cookie Dough from Looxi Beauty as the next option, or Moon Dust from Glam Shop as another option. As you can see, You're My Only Hope, the top shade, is not very vibrant. I almost feel like it should have a blue shift, just because none of the other iridescent multichromes have a blue shift, which is why I kind of selected alternatives and dupe options that have blue shifts in them. I wasn't sure if it doesn't have the shift because it's, a 3-year-old palette, almost a 4-year-old palette at this point. So you see that Celestial Petal instead has beautiful blue glitter particles throughout, and the next shade below it is Cookie Dough, from Looxi, which also has a gorgeous, gorgeous blue to purple shift. And it's a lot more iridescent. It doesn't have a base really like You're My Only Hope does. And then at the bottom, we have Moon Dust from Glam Shop, which very closely mimics cookie dough, and it's in fact a little bit more wet looking. Next dupe option is Nice Gray from Glam Shop, and it's definitely not a gray shade, but a beautiful light brown. Nice Gray is a very close dupe of Naru. It's only a tad bit more mauve. Otherwise, honestly, nobody can see the difference on your eyes. To dupe the middle shade in the palette, I chose Zombi from Devinah. Even the texture of this shade looks very similar to the texture of the Kaleidos shade. If you don't have Zombie and you still want to find an alternative, you can try Multiverse from Terramoons. I have swatched Multiverse many times in my past duping videos. It does not have as much of a teal shift, which is why I didn't include it as a potential dupe. But you can search through my other videos and see swatches. Zombie, which is the lower swatch, looks like a deeper alternative to Astro, but the shifts are very similar. Also, it's possible that Astro just lost its depth due to time. You know, again, these shimmers might have died out a little bit. Also, Astro at this moment looks a little bit sheer. You can't see your skin color from under it. I'm not sure if this shade always looked like this. Frankly, I haven't used this palette in the past year. But the shifts are very similar. You have the purple shift, the blue shift. You just don't have the black depth. You even have the same kind of glitteriness. You just don't have the same depth. For our next dupe, I picked Esme, also from Devinah. And beauties, my nails are, again, press-ons from Kiss. And this is my other hand. They're so cute and festive. I love Kiss nails. My dupe for this one is a lighter shade that has less depth than the original shade Rock Hopper. This kind of shift, sort of a grayish, muted down purple, is one of my favorite matte shades. But I realize I don't have a lot of them in my collection, evidently. To dupe our next shade, I picked Primordial from Shroud. It's kind of ironic that Primordial was the closest dupe I could find to this shade, knowing how many singles I have. To dupe this palette, I tried to not go into another palette, and I only looked at my singles to find singles to dupe this palette. Cylon, the OG shade in the palette, looks so beautiful. If I've still kept this palette, it's because of how beautiful these mattes still perform. I'm so impressed, and I don't know why Kaleidos does not make single shadows. If you don't have Primordial from Shrouds, I'm sure if you have Orchidea Knot, you can find a dupe for shade in that palette. In general, it was difficult to dupe the iridescent multichromes because some of them have dried up at some level. But for this next one, I picked Halo of Stars from Terramoons, and I thought this is the closest dupe to what the swatch should look like. Celestial still performs relatively well after so many years, and you can see the diffused shift of gold to pink, which you all know is one of my favorite shifts, but I love an extreme shift, and I thought if I were to bring this palette to today's world, I would use something that matches the times, which is why I picked Halo of Star, which also has a gold to pink shift, but is a much more extreme, vibrant kind. To dupe our next shade, I chose Glimmer from Cleona. I consider Glimmer an exact dupe of Nova. You all can see it looks as if I've swatched the same shade twice. There's barely any difference between these two shades. They have the exact same pinks and purples at the same angle. And you do have all of the glittery blues throughout. You could possibly use cookie dough or moon dust for this. And although they have the blue shift, they don't have the pink or purple shifts, which is why I didn't even consider them. Because Glimmer is such a close dupe, there was no point in looking for another dupe. I have two options for the next shade. The first one is Bergamotka from Glam Shop, and the second one is Centerfold from Colourpop, depending on how deep you want this shade to be. I have Samus from the palette at the top, Centerfold, which is a lot more coral, in the middle, and Bergamotka, which is deeper, but more closely resembles Samus at the bottom here. This next shade was also kind of difficult to dupe again because my shade from the palette, being a shimmer, has kind of dried up. And I swatched a whole lot of my shimmers and finally realized that one of the shimmers from Citrus Punch's palette, the Simply Posh palette, is a very, very close dupe. I again expect that the shimmer from the palette has dried up a little bit and has lost a little bit of vibrance as a result, but you can very easily see the coral to gold shift, and that's the same shift you see in the Simply Posh shade. In the viewfinder, I see a lot more orange with the Simply Posh shade, when in reality it doesn't really have as much orange. There is some gold throughout the shade, but not the extreme orange shift. Let me see if I move this, if you still see that. Yeah, I think the gold kind of manifests a little bit as an orange here. But of all the reds and corals that I had, this shade most closely resembles what is in this palette and what I thought Nebula looked like 4 years ago. Also, both shades have tiny, tiny glitters. Again, we never talk about unsafe plastic glitters, but that also made these two shades close dupes in my mind. And for a last shade, I picked Karamelizowany from a Glam Shop. And last but not least, we have Red Giant. If you see tiny glitters, it's the remnants of all the past shades that I swatched. Both of these shades are pure mattes. Again, look at how Red Giant swatches after 4 years. I'm just in love with these mattes. Good job, Kaleidos. Please bring on those single mattes. That's it, beauties. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really makes these videos show up in the algorithm to other people who might find them interesting. If there are any other palettes, older palettes that you want me to dupe, write them in the comments below. Love you all. Bye.